Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse show us another amazing collection of art style in the second movie, and I'm very sure this movie inspired a lot of artists to learn and create something in this art style. And in this video, I'll show you how I create this Spider-Man 2099 shader from something that looks like this to this. And in this project, I'm gonna use Eevee because some of the node that I'm gonna use is only gonna work on this engine. Okay, let's jump right into the project. Here, I've collected some references and mostly are taken from the movie, which I think is okay since this is just a case study. And the goal here is to have a clear art direction, so we don't get lost on the process. As you can see from the concept, the texture is very detailed and contains many layers of texture. Even if you pause the movie at random time, the frame looks like a painting, which tells us every frame was well designed. And the part that caught my interest is the Spider-Man 2099 shadow, which looks like it was drawn using a black marker pen, but it still have the same look even though the angle changed or the shadows changed. Okay, now here I already have my model and also a simple directional lighting setup that will illuminate the character from the 3/4 angle and also from the back to show the grim light. And now we can start working on the shader. We can just delete this principal material and then we can create a diffuse material. And then we can just connect it to the material output. And then next we can create shader to RGB and also a color ramp. And actually there's no difference between the diffuse and also the color ramp output, as you can see here. But now we can remap the shading of the diffuse material. And now we can add more points to the color ramp and move the point a little bit closer to each other, like this, to make the value transition even narrower, as you can see here on the render. And now we have the separation between the highlight, the mid and also the shadow. And yeah, you can still adjust it as you like. Okay, in case the scene is too dark or too bright, I recommend you to have more control rather than changing the color ramp point position. And here, I will create a map range node and connect it between the shader to RGB and also the color ramp. This way, you can adjust the shadow intensity and also adjust the brightness intensity. And the next step is I'm gonna add a rim light using the layer weight, and then connect the final output to a map range. Here, if we change the minimum value, it will adjust the white color only gonna be visible around the face that is not facing the camera, like this. I think for me the ideal number is around 0.14. I think it's okay, looks okay. And now we can connect the rim light with the color ramp output. Just press Ctrl Shift, right click and drag it into the color ramp, like this. Next we can change the factor value into 1 and then change the blending mode into screen. And you can see the result now. The next thing we're gonna do is to combine this nodes output, and we're gonna multiply it with a temporarily RGB node. Okay, now let's create a RGB node and then press Ctrl Shift, right click, drag to the RGB. And then we can change the factor into 1 and the blending mode into multiply. Now we can see the shadow with the color. I think to make the looks clearer, I need to brighten up the background a little bit. I think around 0.3 is enough. The next step that I'm gonna do is to group up everything except for the RGB node. Now I can select everything except for the RGB node and then press Ctrl G to make a group. Here I'm gonna connect the from minimum value and also the from maximum value to the group input, so later I can change the value from the group attributes. And I'm also gonna change the value name, the second one into shadow and also the third one to brightness. And if we press tab, it will minimize the group. And then here we can change the shadow value, increase it to make the shadow more intense, and And also we have the control for the brightness. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to change the color input name. I will change it just to color. I think it's a good idea to make the brightness level relative to the shadow value. So here I'm gonna add a math node and connect the shadow value and also the brightness value to the math node and connect the output to the from max. And here I keep the function just like that. Now, if we change the shadow intensity, the brightness also will be moved relative to the shadow value. See, I think it's more flexible to work with something like this. And last thing that I'm gonna add is the rim light value input. I'll rename the input to rim light. Now we can press tab and then check how the value gonna change the shader. I think I need to change the maximum into 0.5 maybe. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's better rather than to have everything covered with rim light. Okay guys, that's the final touch for the diffuse shader. Now let's move into the next section, which is the diffuse texture. Before we start creating our texture in Substance Painter, let's have a look on how the Spider-Man suit color looks like in the movie. It appears that the suit have a vibrant blue base with a soft cloud-like brighter color layer on top. And additionally, sometimes you see soft brush strokes and sometimes a very contrast brush strokes all over the body. And if you're not careful enough, you might miss this darker blue blurry area. And I'm guessing the touch of the darker blue area is to maintain the contrast, so the overall color will not become brighter after the lighter color was added. Okay, let's open our model in Substance Painter. For the start, I will start by creating a fill layer and change the color to the mid-tone blue color that you can find from the reference. And if you wonder how I can have the layer properties on the viewport, you just need to right click on the viewport. I feel not having the properties panel on the right side, it's better because I have more space for the layer panel. Since we only gonna need to use the diffuse color, we're gonna only need to see the texture from the base color channel. Next, I will create the first texture layer, which is the soft cloud-like lighter blue color. Create a fill layer, and then we can pick the lighter blue color from the reference. And then we can add a black mask to this layer. Next, I want to add a texture to the mask, so I need to add a fill to the mask and choose the cloud 2 texture, which fit with the texture that I want. And now we can adjust the texture. But because the texture is projected based on the UV seams will be visible on the 3D model texture. That's why I will change the projection type to the triplanar projection. This way, we don't need to worry about the seam will be visible. Now, we can start to adjust the size, the balance, and also the contrast, and make sure the texture is not that contrast because we want to have the soft transition look. Next, I will create the dark blue spots. The technique is the same, the only difference is just adjusting the balance, the size, and make sure the darker area is not dominating the whole color. Just make it at the right balance. And I also add a blur adjustment to the mask to make it softer. You notice that there's a repetition on the texture projection. Maybe you can rotate the projection a little bit, like this. Now, I will create another texture layer, which is something that looks like a brush strokes that goes along the body and also the limbs. And for the color, we can use the same light blue color, or maybe we can make it a little bit brighter to give it more contrast to the other color. And I will use a directional noise one for this. For the size, let's make it not too big and also not too small. Just make it looks okay from a full shot view. And for the balance and contrast, here I adjust it so the texture have a contrast edge and also have some gap between the patterns. And since all of the UV orientation is vertical like this, it helps me to make all of the body part have the same texture orientation. It's better to plan for this when you are working on your UV layout. Actually, I don't want to have all of the texture visible. I need to cover some of the texture using a paint layer on the mask. The technique that I'm gonna use here is by covering everything with black mask, and after that, I can use the eraser to reveal back the texture. And if you want to hide the texture, you can paint it with a black colored mask. And yeah, while you are working on the masking, you can still adjust the mask balance and contrast. While working on the mask, just keep in mind that not every part needs the texture. Having some gap between the texture will give it more contrast towards the other color. So yeah, just don't give it too much. Another note, it's better to avoid to have the texture close to the UV seams since it's gonna show the UV seams. Okay, I think that's enough. We can edit more later if we need it. Now, I will export the texture, and here, I only gonna export the diffuse channel texture, and I think 2K resolution is enough for this. Next, we're gonna open the texture on Photoshop, and I'm gonna draw some texture there. Actually, this step is not necessary, but if you want, you can try. The texture that I want to make here is a sharp light blue color texture, just like we did in Substance Painter, but this time we're gonna make it using this brush. And the brush that I will use here is a brush preset by Lin Chen. She is a great 2D artist who likes to paint a cute animal, especially corgi. So go check her Instagram, maybe you will get inspired by her artwork. And if you want to download this brush preset, I've put the link down in the description. Okay, let's go back to our texture. And the technique that I use here is the same with what we did in Substance Painter. First, we create a layer filled with the color that we want, or maybe you can also use the solid layer and change the color. And after that, we will need to create a black mask, and then we can continue to use the white brush to create our texture. I use this technique in all of my personal project and also my professional work. While working on the texture, maybe it's best to make certain rules on how you're gonna paint the texture. Like what I did here, mostly I want to paint the texture on the flat surface of the geometry, or sometimes I'm thinking to paint the texture like it's a highlight texture. Or maybe you can also think that the texture is representing the shadow or dark area of your model. The next layer that I want to have is the purplish color that acts like a shadow. And I tried to change the color and the blending mode to adjust the color so it suits with the other color. And I don't want to make this texture stand out more than the other color. And the last texture that I want to create here is a texture that will not affected by the shadow. Later I will save this texture separately and then combine this texture back in the shader. Yeah, finally, here is the result, and this is the look of the shadless texture. And I'm going to save the texture into two textures, and the first one is including all of the layers, and the second one is only the shadeless texture with a black background. And next we're gonna put them in our shader. Now we can just delete the temporary RGB node color and replace it with our texture. And this is how it looks. And next we can add our shadowless texture and combine it with the diffuse shader output. Change the factor into 1 and then also change the blending mode to screen. And here's the result. But just as a note, later the shadowless texture around the black area will be covered by the shadow texture, so we will only able to see it around the mid-tone shadow. Okay, moving on to our next texture. We are going to add a projected texture that will be multiplied with our diffuse material. And we are going to use a grunge texture that looks like this. So first, I'm gonna drag the texture here. And since this is a projected texture, we are gonna need to add a camera. Just press Shift A and then select camera. And just press numpad 0 to see it from the camera. And I also want to activate the camera to view, so we can easily change the angle of the camera. And maybe if you want, you can add this function to your quick favorite list by just right clicking on the menu and then select add to quick favorite. And to access it, just press Q on the viewport and you can see your favorite list there. Now we are going to create some nodes for our texture projection. We can just add a texture coordinate. And just for example, I will connect the window output to our texture, and now we can see the texture is projected based on the camera angle and position. But I don't want the texture to be always following the camera position. I want the texture just stay there with the model even though the camera is moving away from the character. So I think it's better to project the texture based on an object transformation. And here I will create an empty as the object and drag the object output to the texture factor input and change the object input to empty. And now we can see the texture is projected according to the object position and rotation and also scale. And next I also want to have the empty to be always facing the camera using a constraint. We can go to the constraint tab and then add track to and select camera as the target. Next I will also add a mapping node and I put it between the texture coordinate and also the image texture. And this will be used for an offset control for the texture transformation. Here I will adjust the scale for the default scale, or you also can adjust the position or the rotation if you want. Here we finish our projected texture, and now we can combine it with our diffuse texture. Just press Ctrl Shift and right click on the projected texture and drag it into the diffuse texture node and change the factor to 1 to see it in full opacity and change the blending mode to multiply. After that, we can just adjust the factor to make it more subtle, and hopefully it will help to break the feeling that this is actually a 3D object. And after that, we can connect the mix node and drag it into the color input. So yeah, after that, just take your time to adjust the value, because I know that each of us will have a different value and also we have a different taste. Moving on to our final layer for the shader. There will be another video for this series soon, so hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss the next video. And yeah, your support means a lot to me and it helped me to keep the momentum going for creating another more exciting content. Okay, let's go back to our shader. Now we are going to create a rim light effect that looks like this, and if you look closely, you'll notice that there are two rim lights, the hard one and also the softer one. And I think the softer one can be used to blend the hard rim light with the other color, or also can be used to enhance the storytelling you'd like to tell. Okay, we'll start by creating a geometry node and also a normal node, and then connect the normal output from the geometry node to the normal node. If you take a look on the dot output, you'll notice that the object appears to be illuminated from the top. And actually you can adjust the lighting angle by changing the normal direction from the normal node, and we will use this to determine where's the light coming from. Actually, I'm planning to have the rim light angle to follow the camera angle, ensuring consistent rim light regardless of the viewing angle. And to achieve this, we're just gonna create a vector transform, insert it between the geometry node and also the normal node, and you don't see any changes until you change the conversion target to camera. And now we can see that the rim light now appears to follow the camera's angle. Next, I'll incorporate this texture to mask out some of the rim light, and we are going to work on the soft rim light first. Here, I add the texture to the shader, and next we can create a texture node and also a mapping node, and then connect them like this. And after that, I'll continue to adjust the scale and also the rotation, to align with the body, arms and also the leg, ensuring it looks visually appealing from distance. By the way, do you remember our discussion about the UV orientation? Actually, it helps a lot with our texture projection, right? After that, you still have the flexibility to play with the texture position to achieve the most varied texture possible, and opting for a contrast texture will result better for the rim light. To enhance the contrast, I'll create a map range node and adjust the from value to make the darker area darker and also lighten the brighter area to achieve a more pronounced contrast. After we have our texture ready, now we can mask out the rim light by creating a mix node and connect the normal node and map range node like this. And don't forget to change the blending mode to multiply and change the factor to 1. And now we can combine the black and white color as a mask with our main shader. We can just duplicate the mix node from here and connect them all like this and change the blending mode to mix. And the big color here is going to be the color of our rim light, and here I'd like it to be a cyan color. Alright, next we are going to create a hard rim light, and first we're gonna need to create a map range, and we can adjust the value to make the white area to be thinner and also more contrast. Once we have set up, we will multiply the map range output with the brush texture and make sure that the rim light still remain contrast and still have the brush texture around the rim light edges. And if you're curious about how it interacts with the main shader, we can blend it the same way with the soft rim light, and we can adjust the rim light later. Yeah, I think it's looking good. We just need to make the rim light around the object edges to be more contrast, and also ensure that the brush texture remains visible. Okay, so far the overall texture looks good. What do you think about the result so far? If you have any thoughts or questions about what we have covered in this video, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. And in the upcoming segment, we are going to create this red emissive shader with the animated effect. Can you guess how I made this shader? Alright then, I'll catch you in the next video.